Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today we're back at it with another spoiler video for Magic the Gathering's Final Fantasy expansion, but this one's a little bit different. This one's kind of special because we're going over all of the rares and mythic rares that are coming in the starter kit for this expansion. And even though all of the commons and uncommons that are coming in this starter kit are cards that are included in the base standard legal set, they're cards that are also going to appear in the booster packs that you'll be opening, that you'll be using to play sealed and draft and that sort of thing. All of the rares and mythics are not going to be available in those booster packs. They're exclusive just to this starter kit. And the one downside to that is because they're exclusive to the starter kit, they are a little bit underpowered in comparison to a lot of the other rares and mythics that you can pull out of packs. But there's still some pretty cool cards here, and for any Final Fantasy fan that's kind of new to Magic and looking to dip their toes in and try to enter into the game in the easiest, most accessible way possible, I do think this starter kit is pretty good for those kinds of players, and these rares will be pretty interesting and a pretty easy way to sort of ease them into the world of Magic the Gathering. And there are a few things here that I think could still be competitive within standard, potentially, depending on how the rest of the set ends up being once all is said and done and the dust settles. So it is worth going over all of these cards. These are all of the rares and mythics coming in the starter kit. Please like the video. It helps me get it out to more people and helps the channel grow. I would appreciate it more than I can express with words. And subscribe if you're new so you can catch all of the spoilers as they're released. I have a ton of content on the way, but let's dive in. The first card we're going to talk about here is Beatrix, Loyal General. Sorry, Beatrix. Beatrix, Loyal General, a 4/4 legendary human soldier with vigilance for 2 white and 4. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may attach any number of equipment you control to target creature you control. Now, the one downside to Beatrix is that she's a little overcosted. 6 mana is a lot. If your 6 mana spell isn't winning you the game, it's hard to justify it making the cut in a competitive standard legal deck. But that being said, there is still some potential here for Beatrix to be pretty cool. We've seen a lot of equipment tribal coming in this set, a lot of synergies that stack up on equipments. So a card like this could theoretically end up being good enough even at 6 mana, depending on how crazy those synergies for equipment cards end up actually being once all is said and done. So I wouldn't count this card out completely from being competitive, but 6 mana is a lot. That being said, 4/4 Vigilance and getting to literally equip any equipment for free to any creature you want, it could be her, it could be another creature, does seem pretty good, especially with some of the other really expensive equipments that we're going to see a little bit later on in this video. So I wouldn't count her out completely, but she is pretty expensive. Next up, we've got Rosa, Resolute White Mage from Final Fantasy IV. She's a 2/3 legendary human noble cleric with reach for 1 white and 3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains lifelink until end of turn. So again, not awful, a little bit understated, but for 4 mana, you're getting a 2/3 reacher that could theoretically target itself to get a counter, which means the turn you play it, it could be a 3/4 creature with reach and lifelink until end of turn that can just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger on subsequent turns, can also continue to make other creatures bigger. The more creatures you have to target with the +1/+1 counter ability, the better she gets. If you have a decent 3-drop down before you play her, you can target that creature the same turn you play Rosa to get the counter and get the lifelink, so you could swing in, gain a bunch of life as well, which makes her much more valuable on the turn you play her. So at the end of the day, I think 4 mana is probably a little too expensive for something like this for competitive play in Standard, just because the card pool is so insane right now. We have a 3-year rotation instead of 2, and we have more sets each year than we've ever had before, and the quality of cards available to us within the card pool is just so insane that I don't think something like this makes the cut. But that doesn't mean it's completely awful, right? Having this sort of Luminarch aspirant sort of effect is very valuable. The fact that you get lifelink for free is also pretty cool. And yeah, I just think she's really awesome flavorfully as well. Next up, we've got Ultimecia Temporal Threat. This is a 4/4 legendary human warlock for 2 blue and 4. When she enters, you tap all creatures your opponents control, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So, pretty interesting. It's worth noting that you can flicker Ultimecia to tap down your opponent's creatures over and over and over again in a deck that's built around being able to do that, and that makes her a little bit better than she otherwise would be, but 6 mana is still a lot. That being said, getting to get rid of all of your opponent's blockers and draw a card for every single creature that hits in for combat damage seems really good. Seems like it could be pretty good in Commander too, right? Because you tap down all of the creature that all of your opponents control, and you can swing whatever you want at whatever opponent, draw a whole bunch of cards, still have the 4/4 body. It's just a lot. Being able to draw a bunch of cards while also taking away their blockers, while also the fact that taking away their blockers helps you get in for damage so that you can draw all those cards. When you start to put the pieces of the puzzle together, it really does seem like more and more she's worth the 6 mana, but I do think on the surface, I wouldn't blame you for thinking 6 is too much. But I think at the end of the day, this might actually be worth trying. I don't know if it will actually make the cut in competitive standard decks, because again, power creep is so insane and the card pool is so big right now. But I do have a feeling it's going to be a lot better than it looks on the surface, just because you're automatically guaranteeing the ability to draw a bunch of cards the turn that you play it, and they still have to deal with her and get her off the board, or you continue to do it every single turn. So we're going to have to wait and see. It's definitely one that we're going to have to test out. But next up, we've got Deadly Embrace. I do think this might see standard play in just the right deck. This is a sorcery for 2 black and 3. Destroy target creature an opponent controls, and then draw a card for each creature that died this turn. So what's cool is if you play Deadly Embrace in some kind of a Sacrifice or Aristocrat style deck, you could just sacrifice your whole board for a value anyway. We've already seen Sephiroth Fabled Soldier being an amazing payoff for Sacrifice. If you're in that kind of deck, just sacrifice your board to get a whole bunch of payoff already for, you know, death triggers and stuff like that, and then also spend 5 mana, kill their best creature, and draw a ton of cards. You could do a lot worse than that for 5 mana. I think it's going to come down to how consistently can you draw a whole grip of new cards off of casting Deadly Embrace, because that's going to make the difference in it being viable in Constructed or not. As long as it can do that most of the time, I think it might be worth considering, but if it's cute and it only happens once in a while, it probably doesn't end up making the cut. Being sorcery speed is kind of rough. 5 mana is a lot. But in just the right deck, under just the right circumstances, this could gash you up a ton while getting the biggest threat off the table. Next up, we've got Seymour Flux, a 5/5 legendary spirit avatar for 1 black and 4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay a life. If you do, you draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on Seymour Flux. So it's a Phyrexian Arena that for an extra 2 mana, you get a 5/5 body that gets bigger with a counter every single turn. That's not awful, honestly. It is still a bit expensive. I think cards like Unholy Annex are worth running over this, because you can pay the 3 for the card draw and then still also pay the 5 to get a body that the default body that you get ends up being better than the body you get with Seymour Flux. But that does still take a total of 8 mana over the course of a couple turns. Whereas this just, you get it all for 5. I have a feeling this is a little bit better than it looks on the surface. I still think it might be a little bit overcosted. I think your card draw effects you want to come in at cheaper. But it's not nothing that you get a 5/5 body that grows every single turn tacked on to your Phyrexian Arena style effect for only an extra 2 colorless mana. That actually seems worth considering at least. It's also worth noting that like you can get back your draw engine with like reanimation spells and stuff like that. That's a little bit of extra silver lining value that puts this ahead of other cards that are doing the same thing like Phyrexian Arena. At the end of the day, I still think it's probably a little too expensive and it doesn't quite make the cut because again, power creep is just so insane in standard right now. I think if it was a more reasonable standard, if power creep wasn't insane, and if there weren't just so many sets with such a huge card pool, I think in a different universe, this actually could have been a pretty good card in Standard, but with the way Standard is right now, I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see what Standard looks like when the dust settles after rotation comes, and if cards like this actually end up becoming more viable. But next up, we've got Judgment Bolt, an instant for 1 red and 4. It deals 5 damage to target creature and X damage to that creature's controller, where X is the number of equipment you control. I actually think this card is really interesting. Being able to kill their best creature, maybe kill their Sheoldred or whatever, while also doing a metric ton of damage straight to their head, does seem kind of nice. You can also do it at instant speed, so you can kind of use it as a combat trick if you need to. 4 mana is a bit much, but I think if you can really double down on capitalizing on the equipment tribal theme and doing a ton of damage to their head, it could be worth it. We've already seen a bunch of weapons that have the job select ability that create 1/1 creature tokens when you play them. And if you're just playing a ton of those, it's a way to make sure you have more equipment in your deck, because you don't need to worry as much about also playing creatures that you can equip the equipment to. All of your equipment are coming with creatures. So if you go that route, you can theoretically include a lot more equipment in your deck than you otherwise would be able to, go even wider with equipment, and then something like this becomes a lot more relevant. If you're just curving out with equipment that are also creatures every single turn and forcing your opponent to contend with your board state the same way you would if you were just playing creatures every turn, but then all of a sudden you have a bunch of equipment just sitting there, nuke their best creature, do a whole bunch of damage to their head, and maybe kill them with an Alpha Strike really soon after that because of it. I don't know. I could see a world where this could line up. But I do feel like a broken record constantly saying that I think if Standard had less cards in it and the card pool wasn't, so crazy with so much quality and power creep wasn't so nuts, I think this card would have a better chance of making the cut in Standard. But I do still think there is a chance in just the right deck. Next up, we've got Lightning Security Sergeant. This is the one card that I feel like is super underpowered and probably doesn't have a chance in Standard. 2/3 legendary human soldier with menace for 1 red and 2, and whenever she deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top card of your library. You may play that card for as long as you control lightning. Really understated. I don't know why this didn't have haste. If it had haste, it would still be kind of on the fence of whether it's good enough for Standard, but it would at least be considerable. Because you could wait until they don't have a way to block this, they don't have 2 blockers up because of the menace or whatnot, and wait to play it on a turn where you know you can get it to trigger, so that you at least get a little bit of value off of it. But it being just a 2/3 menace, and you have to wait, and it has to survive a whole turn cycle before you can swing in, is kind of a bummer. I think the one thing about this card that is kind of cool, that's easy to overlook, is the fact that you don't have to play the card you exile right away. You don't even have to play it by the end of your next turn, which is usually the best case scenario for this sort of ability. You could just play it for as long as you control lightning, and since the body isn't that great, if you are playing a creature heavy deck, you're probably going to have other threats that your opponent wants to kill more than lightning. So the chances of keeping lightning around and getting to get value off of something that you exile does go up, and I do think that's kind of interesting. But at the end of the day, I still think it's just understated for the cost. It dies too easy, and I just don't think it compares to the power creep that's already in Standard. Next up, we've got Magitech Scythe. This is an artifact equipment for 4 colorless mana. It equips for 2 colorless. Equipped creature gets +2/+1. But the most important part of this card is it has a test of your reflexes ability. So when this equipment enters, you may attach it to target creature you control. If you do, that creature gains first strike until end of turn and must be blocked this turn. So pretty interesting combat trick that your opponent might not see coming. I guess I shouldn't say a combat trick because it's not instant speed. But if you use this just right, attach it to just the right creature, swinging in with first strike, knowing that you're going to survive combat no matter what, and you're also going to kill something no matter what because it has to be blocked, is actually pretty nuts. If you use this on a creature that has trample, it gets even crazier. They don't get to choose to not block it, to mitigate the problem of it having trample and getting through for damage, whether they block or not. But at the same time, even if they do block it, you can't kill it no matter what because of the first strike. as long as you're, smartly using this and playing it right. So you kill their thing no matter what during first strike combat, you trample over, that sort of thing. It does have some interesting uses. That being said, a total of 6 mana to get this online is kind of nuts. Well, I guess it's not 6 mana to get it online, right? It attaches to something for free the turn that you play it. So 4 mana, do the thing. Eventually, if the thing dies, you pay 2 to equip this to something else, and it gets +2/+1. It's definitely overcosted. It's definitely not doing enough to be worth making the cut on its own. But the one thing I do want to point out that gives it a fighting chance is the fact that there are so many equipment synergies coming in this set that anything that is an equipment is just better, just period, by being an equipment, because there are going to be so many things to synergize with. Things that maybe reduce the cost of playing them, or reduce the cost of equipping them, or grant extra abilities to things that are equipped. There are just so many cards coming in this set that make equipment so much better. So therefore, an equipment like this, that is colorless, that can be put in any deck where you don't have to worry about the color, it does have a chance of actually making the cut. I still don't think it's quite good enough. It's a little overcosted, but it definitely has a chance with the right equipment synergies of still being something that's kind of crazy and worth considering. So we're gonna have to wait and see when the rest of the set gets spoiled. But next up, we've got Ultima Weapon, arguably the better equipment coming in this starter kit. This is a 7 mana legendary equipment, which is kind of nuts. As if that wasn't crazy, it also takes 7 mana just to equip it. That's a whopping 14 mana just to get this thing online, which is kind of absurd. Whenever equipped creature attacks, you destroy target creature an opponent controls, and the equipped creature gets +7/+7. Now, 14 mana is not worth it to get this ability online. That being said, if you take away the fact that it's so expensive and you just look at what it does, turning literally any creature into a game-ending threat, even your little 1/1 token can be an 8/8, and creatures that are bigger than that get even bigger. Creatures that have evasion in any way, flying, lifelink, trample, all that stuff, just become absolute game-ending monsters. Plus, whenever you attack, you destroy whatever creature you want, which means even if they do have a bomb on their side that they could maybe trade with you, or block and kill your creature, or whatever the case may be, you get to make sure you remove the biggest problem creature on their side before they even get to declare blockers. And that is also super strong, and you get to do it with every single attack phase. Every single turn you get to trigger this. And even if they do manage to block and kill the creature or use removal on the creature, you still have the equipment left behind to re-equip and do it all over again. The problem is how expensive it is. But again, I'm going to go back to the fact that there's so many equipment synergies coming in this set. It is possible that there are cards that will let us get this out for free or maybe really cheap. It's possible there are synergies coming that let us equip for free or really cheap. We already saw Beatrix earlier in this spoiler video that can equip something for free every turn. So that equip 7 turns into basically equip 0. And with those sorts of synergies, that's where you can start to see something like this being super relevant. Now, in older formats, we have better super expensive equipment than this, I think. So I don't know if it's going to be relevant there. But if we do have the standard legal cards to support this, enough synergies to equip for free or cheap, to get this out for cheaper or maybe free, if a lot of those types of synergies can be in the deck with it, a card like this could actually make the cut in standard and could end up being nuts. If you can get it out cheap, equip it cheap, just start swinging in and nuking things with an absolutely game-ending threat, it could absolutely make the cut. It could be viable. We don't know yet. With the cards we've seen so far, I don't think it is. I don't think Beatrix is good enough on her own to justify playing this. But, like I said, if we get more stuff like that, this could make the cut. It could be nuts. In a perfect world where we have a way to equip this for free and play it for free, this would be absolutely broken. So we'll have to wait and see just how deep the equipment synergies go, but at least the potential is there. Next up, we have our first multicolor card. This is Xandi Darkmage, a 3/3 legendary human wizard with menace for 4 mana in the colors of Dimir. And 𝔬▒ gets +1/+1 for each non-creature, non-land card in your graveyard. This card is nuts. This might be the best rare included in this starter kit. And granted, it's still kind of expensive, right? It's still 4 mana. It can still just die the turn it comes out and you don't get any value off of it. All of those are very relevant worries about this card, but it's definitely the most competitive card we've seen. It's super easy to just play this in a deck that is an artifact tribal deck, or an enchantment deck, or an enchantment and artifact deck, or any combination of artifact, enchantment, instant, sorcery, battle. All of that stuff counts as giving this +1/+1 in your graveyard. If you're in a deck that can just self-mill, surveil, all that stuff and fill up your graveyard quick, there are way, way, way more cards that can buff this thing up than really it has any right to have, right? And the Menace. Like, we haven't seen a sort of Lurgoyf style card like this that has this evasion built in, like Menace. So I could see a world where this could be like the finisher in some kind of a crazy control deck. You don't have to worry about playing enough creatures to buff this up. The fact that you're playing non-creature spells to buff it up means you can be entirely focused on removal and just constantly nuking everything your opponent's putting out. And the more you do it, the bigger 𝔬▒'s going to get. And if you have ways to protect 𝔬▒ or to bring 𝔬▒ back from the graveyard, if your opponent happens to kill him, it gets even crazier. So I do think it's possible that this card has a standard deck that is perfect for him. Maybe a control-oriented shell that makes him nuts. And I'm excited to at least mess around and see how viable that might be. I think out of all the cards in this starter kit, this one might have the best chance of actually being relevant in standard. But next up, we've got Cloud, Planet's Champion, the Mythic in one of the decks in this starter kit. He's a 4/4 legendary human soldier mercenary for 5 mana in the colors of Boros. Equip abilities: you activate that target Cloud costs 2 less to activate, so that Ultima Weapon could equip for 5 instead of 7. And during your turn, as long as Cloud is equipped, he has Double Strike and Indestructible, which is kind of nuts. 5 mana is a lot, but again, I have to reiterate the fact that equipment's going to matter a ton after this set drops. There are a ton of equipment synergies. So a card like this that works well with equipment is just going to be better than it otherwise would be. And you have to take all of that into account. And there's a lot more coming that we haven't even seen yet that's going to make a card like Cloud, Planet's Champion that much better. So don't count it out just yet. It is a lot of value if you can get it working. That being said, 5 mana for a thing that if they kill it gets you no value is pretty rough. And I think that's sort of a pattern that we're seeing emerge. The big difference between the rares and mythics in the starter kit as opposed to the stuff in the booster packs is a lot of the stuff in the starter kit doesn't net you any value if they kill it the turn it comes into play. Whereas most of the stuff that's built to be viable in standard, to be competitive in standard, if it costs 4 or 5 or even more mana, it's priced in a way where you're going to get some kind of value the turn you play it to make up for the fact that they might be able to kill it with a removal spell that costs a lot less than what you're paying to get the card out. And I think that's part of the balancing act of rares and mythics in standard legal sets, in packs that you're going to rip, that they usually jump through those hoops. And I think that's the main difference between these starter kit cards. So there is a lot of power in these cards. It's just they're not as efficient, right? They're not as good at providing value if your opponent has answers. But that's going to lead us to our last mythic in the starter kit, and that's Sephiroth, Planet's Heir, a 4/4 legendary human avatar soldier with vigilance for 6 mana in the colors of Dimir. We're seeing a lot of 6 mana in this starter kit. When he enters, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on Sephiroth. So it's sort of like a Massacre Worm, except instead of them taking damage when things die, you have Vigilance, and Sephiroth gets counters when things die. So I don't know if it's as good as Massacre Worm. I think I would prefer Massacre Worm to this. But what is cool about this is you still have a thing that can nuke your opponent's board, potentially be flickered to nuke your opponent's board again. And if you're playing it in Commander, it can be a 𝐷𝐸𝑅 commander that gives you access to blue cards. Massacre Worm is not legendary, so you can't use it as your commander. So having a Massacre Worm that can maybe be your commander is kind of cool. I do like the idea of that. I'm not 100% sure it's powerful enough to be worth being your commander, but at least the option's there. But yeah, I like that this can nuke the board and get super huge, and then if your opponent can't deal with it, it's just gonna run them over the next turn, right? Yeah, it's a fun card. I don't know if it makes the cut in Standard, but I'm glad there's a version of Sephiroth like this that exists to sort of run parallel and complement the other version of Sephiroth that we got that is a lot better in my opinion, but built to be in a very different kind of deck, a very specific deck that's built around sacrifice, whereas this is a just powerful version of Sephiroth that if you love Final Fantasy and you love Sephiroth as a character, you can build a deck with this Sephiroth and just play it as big crazy thing does big crazy thing and just have fun with it and not have to worry about building a very specific archetype around him in order to make him worth using. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for checking it out. I appreciate it immensely. Please hit the like button. Subscribe if you're new so you never miss a video. I've got a ton more spoiler content on the channel already, and there's so much more on the way. So I am going to link links to all of the other spoiler videos we've done so far. We're covering all of the cards as they're released as quick as we can to get that stuff out to you, hopefully before anyone else when we can. And there's a lot of crazy cards coming, so I'm super excited to see what else is coming in the set. There is a ton more on the way, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.